Contact us at 876-630-1210 or sales@nationwidenewsnetwork.com. Businesses, companies, and entrepreneurs, let's supercharge your brand.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice. Justice for all. Justice.
It's Tuesday. Welcome to Monday. Welcome to Let's Talk Justice. I am Jade Williams, Policy and Advocacy Specialist at JFJ.
And I'm Mikkel Jackson, Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice. So it's a beautiful Tuesday, it is. And again, we just want to say thank you to our listeners who have continued to be with us for the duration of the year. We're certainly happy for your engagement on the nationwide YouTube platform, JFJ's YouTube platform, and those who are listening via Radio Land. I'm quite happy to say that quite a bit of people have walked up to me to say that they enjoy the show. So we should just keep building on what we have here. So we also extend our appreciation to the nationwide family for accommodating us on the platform. Yeah,
For sure. Definitely.
So the show for today is going to be a two-part, so to speak. We're going to be discussing the matter of the death penalty and mass detention, as we heard from our Minister of Justice, the Honorable Delroy Chuck, recently. We won't play the clip, but we're just going to speak to some elements of what the good minister said. And on the other half of the program, we're going to be looking at World AIDS Day, how far we've come as a country. Where have we advanced as we talk about this concept and the theme for this year, taking the rights path? Where are we with human rights when it comes to HIV in Jamaica, and what else needs to get done? All right, so That's the show for today. All right, Jade. So I think I'm going to ask you to keep one of your did you know for the substantive part of the show, because I think it's going to be important for an element of what we're going to be discussing. But I'm not sure if you want to lead out. I'm going to switch the human rights of the week to you. And that's the matter involving what is being dubbed by the media the secret deal involving the National Environment Planning Agency and Tradewinds Citrus. And you have been speaking on JFJ's behalf on this particular issue, Jade. And so far, I believe that the deal has since been made public, but there are some troubling areas around it that is quite concerning when we look at how independent NEPA is, and quite frankly, whose interest does NEPA serve? Those are the questions, I would ask us to consider. But over to you to give your perspective on it.
Well, just for the listeners' background, what would have taken place, I'm sure some of us might remember that there was a spill from Tradewinds Citrus, an oil spill, into the Rio Cobre a few months ago. After that spill, there would have been damage to the fish life, to the wildlife in the river. And NEPA would have been able to bring prosecution against Tradewinds Citrus.
They secured a fiat from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution.
Yes, they did, to be able to prosecute them for this breach of our environmental rights here. And of course, of the provisions in the Wildlife Protection Act and other pieces of legislation that protect our environment. Marcus Goff, who has been working closely with the Friends of Rio Cobre, who they are a community group that are environmental activists that have been working to protect the Rio Cobre over the years, was watching the case on behalf of that group and was shocked to find out on a mention date that the case would be dismissed, as there was an agreement, a settlement between Tradewinds Citrus and NEPA. Of course, at that time, the trial judge had asked for a copy of the agreement and was informed by the attorney that it could not be shared as it was private and confidential. So that was of great concern. So that was the the major thing that we spoke to originally, because the lack of transparency in something that is a national issue that is affecting multiple members of the public, it's unclear how it could be settled, one, without the input of the public.
They're
And
talking about medical risk to persons who use the river, loss of livelihood.
exactly.
And then the National Environment Planning Agency, I don't think they're quite aware of the interest that they serve, which is the public's interest in this regard.
Absolutely.
So it's quite befuddling that you would have said to the judge that I can't share this deal because we've entered into some non-disclosure agreement with a private entity.
Yes, and there's been a lot of discussion since then about whether or not they should have been entering into any non-disclosure agreement. Even Tradewind Citrus would have later on said that, it was not a confidential deal. Everyone can know about it. So it's unclear how this all could have been negotiated, one, without the public input and knowledge. And
But I think even more concerning, Jade, is the provision in the deal that seemingly suggests that Tradewinds has been insulated from future prosecution.
yes, on this incident, yes, that's how it appears.
I listened to the acting DPP on it's a program with Leon Jackson Miller, where she basically indicated, after I think some probing from the host, that the office may very well consider exercising the DPP's right to appeal in this regard. And I think it's something we have to closely monitor, because again, there are questions that one must ask. How independent is NEPA? Is NEPA best placed where it is now, where there could be conflict of interest between the objectives of the Ministry of Economic Growth and NEPA in terms of its environmental protection responsibilities? But I think far more concerning is the fact that the NEPA saw it fit to make such an arrangement in the first place, not considering the citizens within the community. So, there you have it in terms of the human rights issues of the week.
Yes.
Jade, apparently, myself included, we have been confusing the listeners. We worked over the weekend, some of us, we had to go to events. So I think we're confusing the good Monday afternoon with Tuesday. So it's a happy Monday afternoon. All right. So the rights of the week, Jade?
Actually, are we going to hold it? We're going to hold it, and we're going to go straight to the trivia questions for this week. So our first trivia question is, Dash and Dash versus the Attorney General of Jamaica is the case famous for challenging Jamaica's death penalty on grounds of delay. So that's our first trivia question, Dash and Dash. So you're to fill in those two dashes. And the Attorney General of Jamaica is the case famous for challenging Jamaica's death penalty on the grounds of delay. So you can respond to that in the chat on Nationwide, and you can send a message on WhatsApp 2397583, or you can respond on our Instagram, JA4Justice.
You have a second one?
Yes, we do, because it is still our 25th anniversary celebration. So we have another 25th anniversary trivia for you this week. And this week's question is, in what year did JFJ win an appeal made by the government challenging the 2020 Supreme Court ruling that the SOE detentions of 5 men were unlawful? So in what year did JFJ win an appeal made by the government challenging the challenging the 2020 Supreme Court ruling that the SOE detentions of 5 men were unlawful? So you can also respond to that via WhatsApp 2397583, Instagram JA4Justice, or in our Nationwide chat. I'm bumbling this morning.
It's a heavy tongue happens from time to time for all of us. All right, so we're going to be discussing for the first half the issue of the death penalty and mass detention. Now, let me start by saying that we are seeing a decrease in the murder rate in Jamaica, which is a welcome one. But though we are seeing a decrease, the types of crimes being committed is one for concern. For example, we see the mass shootings, and it's quite alarming. Citizens are fearful. And when you have these types of incidents occurring, then I think any government, as we've seen over several administrations going back as far as the 1970s, again in the early 2000s, when you had this the popularly called the 6 anti-crime bills that were being promulgated by the then government, you're seeing where a government will adopt an almost tough on crime approach. Now, I've listened to Minister of Justice Delroy Chuck recently suggesting that though he may have a personal opinion against the death penalty, seemingly suggesting that his views may very well change, and that's his own purview. The concern that we have here, that notwithstanding the high murder rate, we should never go down a road that may erode some of the human rights gains that we have had. I want to say this frankly to our listeners, that you already have a provision in Section 3 of the Offense Against the Persons Act that considers capital punishment, which is the death penalty. I am keen on understanding what other legal provisions the government could be considering pushing. Because if you're talking about mass shootings, what already exists in the Offense Against the Persons Act considers this. The question that some people may very well be asking, why have we not exercised the death penalty? Now, we're going to be talking in a few minutes about some of the legal hurdles that may very well not see the death penalty being instituted in any in the near future, unless perhaps there may be some constitutional change. I don't know, something for us to look at. But I wouldn't want government ministers to be talking about the death penalty having some new laws when the matter is already on the books. And I think we have to ask ourselves, what else can we demand of our government to ensure that they continue to see a reduction in the murders that may very well not lead to an erosion of human rights? Now, I know some are listening on and you're saying, but the crime rate is high. But let me be frank, no human rights organization who subscribes to the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR, can ever submit to the imposition of the death penalty. That's just a principled position. But I'm even more concerned that we're seeing what I can almost call a reactive and a reactionary attitude from the government in terms of when these alarming things happen. You hear what you would consider the quips, and you hear this tough on crime approach being considered. And I heard, for example, the Minister of National Security, the Deputy Prime Minister, saying that in these particular provisions, we're going to have to be looking at the right to appeal. And I can't imagine how that could have ever been uttered by a minister when you know that you have the constitutional right to appeal. So again, I'm keen on understanding what legislation the government could ever put forward that would really necessitate a new law being pushed without looking at the existing legal hurdles. So again, that is what Jade and I will be going through. We're going to be taking the break. We're almost upon the 1:15 time. But Jade, when we return, we're going to be looking through what already exists in the Offense Against the Persons Act. What are the legal hurdles that we have seen? What is the jurisdiction that we're guided by here in Jamaica, the laws in the past or the case laws that have taken shape that will influence the decisions, but also what are some of the non-legislative legal hurdles that may still very well prevent the death penalty from being imposed. So I just want to break it down for the listeners so you can come to your own conclusion when these things are being discussed. We take the break.
Get it all in one go. Download and sign up now. The time by the 1JN Passport app is
1:15.
For the Fosridge Christmas in November sale. Shop from November 24 to December 5 and save on chandeliers, wall lamps, ceiling fans and LED bulbs. It's cold outside, so ask about our solar water heaters. It's the Fosridge Christmas in November sale. November 24 to December 5. It's a Fosridge.
Are you ready to turn your sales and marketing skills into high earnings? Nationwide 90 FM is searching for business development executives to build lasting client relationships. If you have experience across all stages of the sales cycle and possess strong communication, negotiation, and time management skills with a proven sales track record, this opportunity is perfect for you. Join our team and work with the top corporate brands, media agencies, and of course, our on-air personalities. Enjoy networking opportunities, professional growth, and competitive commissions. Ready to take the next step? Send your resume to hr@nationwidenewsnetwork.com today.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. Jade and I were discussing the matter of the death penalty. But Jade, before we even get into what currently exists for the existing provisions around the death penalty, I just want to remind the listeners of two things. When the Offense Against the Persons Act was originally passed, let me say this, pre-1992, I believe, it was automatic death penalty for all murders. Yes, automatic. And then the legislators decided to differentiate between capital murder and non-capital murder. And I will ask Jade to, explain the difference in a few. But I want to fast forward to 2004, thereabout, where Lambert Watson, he was convicted of murder, and capital murder, that is, and he was given the death penalty. Now, the matter was challenged in court. It went all the way up to the Privy Council. And what happened with that particular case was that it challenged the mandatory death penalty, and it cannot be imposed automatic in Jamaica anymore following the Lambert Watson matter. It's also important to note that unlike Jamaica, Trinidad still have that on their books. It went all the way to the Privy Council. It was reviewed, and they said that, listen, to the wording of your constitution, mandatory death penalty, it's not unconstitutional. But in the Jamaican landscape, the Watson case set the framework wherein, one, the mandatory death penalty, it being imposed, would undermine certain constitutional rights that we have, like the right to a fair and humane treatment, separation of powers. Those things were discussed at the time, and it's very clear where Jamaica's case law is on that, which is why we're here today, where it cannot be automatically imposed.
Yes.
So in that regard, we have capital versus non-capital punishment in Jamaica. What's the difference, Jade?
Okay, so the difference is really the circumstances in which the murder would have taken place. So for capital murder, there are some specific circumstances in which it can take place. And for non-capital murder, it's every murder, essentially, that would happen outside of those circumstances. And just to be clear, when we talk about murder, we mean you killed someone and you intended to kill someone. It was not an accident, because if it's an accident, it's a different thing, right?
So, I wanted to give the examples now. So if you kill a woman who is pregnant.
Yes, if you kill a member of the security forces, anyone who has similar powers to the JDF or JCF, so they don't have to actually be a member.
A juror.
Right, a juror, a judge, a person who is a witness in a case, a criminal proceeding, that is.
Yes.
If you killed more than one person in the same murder.
And murder, this was a tricky one. If murder happens in furtherance.
Right, in furtherance of another offense. So if you were doing a burglary and you committed a murder in furtherance of that, or vice versa, then that is also capital murder.
Well, not vice versa, because remember that matter went to Privy Council, and the Privy Council challenged them on that to say, listen, how do you know which happened first?
Right.
Is it the burglary that led to the murder, or the murder that led to, a robbery happening? So when you look at those things, even with the Privy Council, their position on death penalty has been very clear. But where I want you to back up, Jade, because again, if it is that you have this in law that very clearly says in the Offense Against the Persons Act, if you kill, 2 or more people at the same time, you can be charged with capital murder.
That's correct.
So I'm keen on understanding where the government's thought process is, because let me say this. if that is already there under the Offense Against the Persons Act, and remember, if you use a gun, so to speak, that is already what you would call an aggravating factor. What exactly would the government, what mischief is the government trying to solve to say that they're going to be coming up with a new legislation that will deal with mass shootings in the country? What is your thought as an attorney where their minds could possibly be?
I think they're maybe trying to solve an enforcement problem legislatively. I think what the issue that they're seeing is that the death penalty is not being used, and I think there is an understanding, and I think it's a misunderstanding that it's not being used because the legislation is not allowing for it to be used. But the legislation is quite clear. It can be used in cases of capital murder. Where the challenge really comes in is not in the legislation, unless we're talking about children. It's in the case law that would have developed over years of trying to implement this legislation.
Yeah.
And as it relates to the death penalty, many years of successive case law have given us some principles that it has to be the worst of the worst, the
rarest of
the
the rare.
rarest of the rare.
And just for the listeners, and I'm going to ask Jade to perhaps just a caution for those listening in. We're going to try our utmost not to go into the brutality of those cases. But as you listening and you see the high murder rate, the Peter Dugal case in Jamaica would have basically cemented the Trimmingham principle in our own jurisprudence here, in terms of our judges are going to be guided by that principle of the rarest of the rare and the worst of the worst.
Yes.
So the Peter Dugal, what crime did he commit? You remember, Jade?
Yes, so he was a farmer laborer, and he was hired to kill some people. He went to their home and he used a firearm to kill them. That's what he was convicted for.
And that particular matter saw the Trimmingham principle being utilized. And what was the Trimmingham case again? That was in St. Vincent.
Yes, and the Trimmingham case was pretty brutal, so, warning. But that involved a beating, beheading, burial of the person, the deceased.
So for those who, you can read up some more, because I know sometimes we look at the cases and, they're heartbreaking. We're angry, quite frankly. Not only some cases really, make us quite depressed as citizens and we are empathetic to the families, all of us, all well-thinking Jamaican, we are empathetic to the families. The question is, as brutal as those cases are, when you look at the Trimmingham case, the what you would call it now, I don't want to use the word standards, but the threshold is so high that you can hardly find a case that would meet that particular threshold. And that is something I want the listeners to understand, that even Jamaica, being a signatory to the first optional protocol of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, it also speaks about these particular threshold, that if a country, for example, were to be imposing the death penalty, you have to ensure that the threshold is so high because you're talking about taking a life.
Yes.
So that's one thing. So we spoke about the Trimmingham principle, the rarest of the rare, the worst of the worst. But one of the things also is, while you have the death penalty, it's not a case where it is an automatic sentencing option. It really relies on the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution to give notice. And if you remember, I don't remember the case, I think it was last year or the year before, where the DPP failed to give the notice within the requisite time frame, and therefore the death penalty could not be sought. So that's not a legislative provision, but it has happened now to become a standard practice.
Yes.
In terms of, again, that threshold. The other thing, Jade, mitigation. I'm often misquoted on this matter, deliberately so, but we won't get into that. On the matter involving that brutal murder done by Clarendon.
Yes.
Where I was explaining that even the sentencing guidelines and the principles thereof when it comes to applying the death penalty really puts a very high threshold wherein the mitigating factors And you saw that happening in that, again, brutal murder down by Clarendon, where one would have to consider mitigating factors. Is this person beyond reform? What is the age of the offender? What are the other mitigating factors you can
I think
remember?
the first thing that we have to consider is a plea. When a person pleads guilty, that is a major mitigating factor for what ultimately their sentence will be, because reduction in the sentence is an incentive for a person to plead guilty, to save our time in the court, and to allow the families to see justice at a much faster rate than they would see in the normal court system. So that it really influences. But when people are doing sentencing, it is they of course look at the act itself. They also look at the social inquiry report of this offender. They look at whether or not they had committed any previous offenses and the nature of those offenses if they had. They look at whether or not they have any mental health issues. They look at so many factors.
But even one of the case laws that we mentioned, I don't remember if it was Dougal or Trimmingham, they had several other convictions,
Yes.
So even then, and I'm happy you made mention of all of these reports, because even after conviction, the judge will still have to go back to whether or not this particular case still meets all the legal standards for capital punishment. And therefore, there are going to be some reports that are going to be necessary, mandatory reports.
Yes.
Then you have to be considering the appeal process. And though that particular I won't call the name of the case. We'll perhaps have to give away the answer, but somebody answered it already, so I think we can say.
Yes, we can.
Though the Pratt and Morgan case is no longer one which is an automatic, what you would call it, legal standard.
Yes.
You find that the principle of the case is still being applied because you do have a right to appeal. How timely is that appeal is going to be another conversation, because that's a case wherein you're going to be convicted of death penalty and they must impose within 2 years. That will not be when the standards of how quickly our justice system moves is not the best. So those are some of the things we consider.
And as you say that, before we take the break, I'll just ask us to show the did you know, because the Pratt and Morgan principle now would have been affected by this constitutional amendment in 2011.
So while we welcome the 2011 Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, certainly we saw where it saw a regression when it comes to death penalty.
Yes, for sure. So in this section, which is 13.8, it states that where the death penalty, it's not considered a violation. So this would have been the direct principle coming out of the Pratt and Morgan case. If there are long delays between the sentencing and execution, and if the conditions of the detention is harsh. So essentially, this is just saying that despite how long it takes, and no matter what the conditions that you're held in, that will not be enough for you to discharge your sentence of death. But as Michael rightfully said, there is law and then there is case law, jurisprudence.
But what is important, the government of Jamaica said we don't need to reaccede to the optional protocol,
yes.
Right? Because we are already guided by the principle of Pratt and Morgan, notwithstanding the constitutional amendment. So the last thing, I think we have about 30 seconds. Jade, you remember your jury provisions? How many and unanimous verdict and so on when it comes to capital murder?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe you have to have the full complement of 12 jurors, and you must have a unanimous decision.
You see? So again, the standards are very high. We're taking a break and then we close out on this particular topic. Then we segue into World AIDS Day.
Yes.
Yes.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
30 degrees Celsius here in Kingston and 29 out west in Montego Bay, a little bit cooler out west.
calling all tradesmen, small contractors, skilled workmen, and small entrepreneurs. Whether you want to start or expand your business or get equipment for your projects, Total Tools will help you tool up and expand your business. Get up to $500,000 to borrow, up to 2 years to repay, and interest rates as low as 3.99%. Come for your loan to get your tools. Offer ends June 2025. Visit Total Tools in Kingston, Ocho Rios, and Drex Hall to get a loan for every tool and every trade.
Tune in to our program live from our YouTube channel, Nationwide 90 FM. And remember to like, subscribe, and share our content. And we're also on WhatsApp at 876-285-5693.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are aware that JFJ's position, which is also shared not interestingly, by several other attorneys and members of the legal fraternity, it's not a popular position to take. But I would urge our listeners that sometimes when we're talking even about justice for the victims, we can't take a position because it's popular and we're just operating from a place of vengeance. We have to take positions that are evidence-based and what impact it would have on the wider justice system. So, for example, politicians will speak, but we have a duty here at JFJ to also explain to you what already exists. And I'm saying to you without fear of contradiction that what is being proposed for a new law is already in the Offences Against the Persons Act. Unless the legal recommendations that is being proposed or that are being proposed would look at some removal of the legal hurdles, for lack of a better word here, that exist, and whether or not what is being proposed can address the case laws that we mentioned earlier. Again, the Trimmingham principle is there, the rarest of the rare. If you're talking about removal of mitigating factors and so on, I want to put in context that these things are international treaties that we're a signatory to. So to my mind, I can't see what law would be passed to reduce these protections that are there. Because if you're taking one's life, you must ensure that you have the highest threshold to be met. And to my mind, I can't see what law the government is going to be passing that will see those legal protections, I'm not going to use the word hurdle now, legal protections that exist being removed. I can't see it. But I also want to say that we have a duty to say to the government of Jamaica, ensure that the laws that you're proposing, they're needed. And it's not just to say to the public that I'm doing something. As much as all these crimes are heinous, they are. But we want to ensure that we continue to support the Jamaica Constabulary Force. Because quite frankly, if you're not catching people, who are you going to be putting to death? So despite all the tough talks that are happening, I believe only one of these unfortunate incidents we've seen where we expect some men to be on trial come January 2025. And we look forward to the trials. But I also want to urge our parliamentarians that they have to be careful what they're saying, because sometimes what they're putting forward is not in keeping with what is actually happening in court. So when you look at the Clarendon case now, brutal case, but this person, the offender, the perpetrator, he was sentenced to some 60 years imprisonment. So there is nothing that suggests that these people are being given some a few years. That's not the case. So I think the parliamentarians, they have a duty to speak from a place of what is actually happening. I won't use the word truth because I don't think they're lying. I just think there's some misrepresentation of the issue. And we can't make laws from an emotive standpoint. As much as I understand that people are calling for these things, we have a duty to explain to our listeners what already exists, even if what we're saying is an unpopular one. human rights work, Jade. I think you're learning this. It's not a popular job.
I knew. But, as we close out this conversation on the death penalty, I would urge persons who are forming opinions about this in either way to look at, the points that are proposed for it, against it, and look at the data that supports each and see how that affects your perspective.
Yeah.
Because I will say, as a person outside of this work, back in my years as a layperson, I would have looked at serious crimes and thought, yeah, man, this person deserves this. Like, this is what should happen. It should be the worst possible punishment. And as I learned more about the implications of this, how this can affect your
The
other
backlogs.
rights,
For rape victims, for example.
no, but then I didn't even consider the possibility of a false imprisonment or an incorrect identification, and that ends up to the death of
Exactly.
a person. So
So you can't say sorry.
exactly.
When you falsely imprison someone, you can give them millions of dollars
Right.
and hope that they can be reintegrated because their innocence has been assured. But when you kill that person, what are you going to say? Not in a justice system that is so flawed. And we didn't touch on the mass detention issue, and apparently the government's continued use of state of public emergency. And one of the trivia questions that you have been asked, JFJ challenged the state of public emergency in that respect. But towards the end of the program, I will read from, I think it was paragraph 85, and I'm going to partly give a little hint now, the Everton Douglas matter that clearly stated what the judge said in that particular case. All right. But we segue. We have Jamar Johnson from the Jamaican Network of Seropositives. Jamar?
Oh, I think we've lost him.
We lost Jamar. We're going to bring Jamar back on the line. So yesterday was World AIDS Day. You see me in my red because this morning Jay did not. Well, she have her little
I have
pin
my
there,
pin.
but she should have been wearing her full red. Because when it's World AIDS Day, we wear our red. We stand in solidarity with people who are living with HIV and people who have died from HIV and AIDS. And I'm happy to say that being at that function held by Jane Plus this morning, we have gotten some data that suggests that we are moving ahead quite well in the country when we look at the reduction in AIDS-related death, when we look at the reduction of the number of people living with HIV. I believe when I used to work in the HIV sector, we had some 29,000 Jamaicans living with HIV. That number has since been reduced to 26,000. But Jamar is much more familiar with the data, so when we get him back, we will touch on those issues. But we're going to be having a conversation with Jamar in terms of what are some of the human rights challenges that continue to affect people living with HIV. Last couple of weeks ago, you recall we had a woman living with HIV and her experience where her sister shared her health status with her work, and she lost her job and was stigmatized within the communities. So those are some of the issues, but we now have Jamar Johnson with us. Jamar?
Hi.
Yes, we saw each other this morning, so just saying welcome to the Let's Start Justice program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to Jane Plus on a well-executed event this morning.
Yeah.
I didn't make it to the church service yesterday, but you also had another event that was also well-executed. So congratulations to the team and to your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, Jamar, I'm not sure if you could paint a picture for the listeners in terms of how far we've come, but the steps we still need to take to realizing the full rights of people living with HIV in Jamaica.
Absolutely. So I want you to think about living in a small community where a small community of about 100, 150 people. Everybody is intimate. Everybody knows each other. It's very difficult for you to have privacy because the houses are so closely connected and that kind of a thing. And somebody finds that they're HIV positive, and another member of the community works at the healthcare facility where it is that that person found that they're positive. And that person who works at the healthcare facility goes and shares that information with a family member. And entire community now knows that Jamar, for example, is a person living with HIV. These are realities that people living with HIV face every day. The issue of unauthorized disclosure, involuntary disclosure,
Yes.
is a very real issue, and it's a direct violation of the right to privacy. Now, truthfully, we would have seen a reduction in stigma and discrimination since the year began, over the past couple of years, especially as it relates to healthcare facilities. And so we can credit that to continuous training that civil society and both government have been doing with healthcare workers. So we are not saying that, it's all bad, because we have made strides. We have made strides in terms of tackling the stigma and discrimination that people living with HIV face, in terms of stigma and discrimination, making it a more stigma-free, welcoming space. We've gotten to that kind of a place. But the truth is there are far more things that needs to be done. We need to realistically and quickly address the issue of unauthorized disclosure, primarily because there is not much protection that the person living with HIV has under our present legislation and or policies. The most that will happen is when a person status is involuntarily disclosed, they get a slap on the arm, and then they move along. And these are lived realities of persons living with HIV as we move forward. Let's paint this picture. As a person living with HIV, I start a job, and as a part of starting a job, I'm required to do some healthcare tests to get my health card, for example, and I refuse to do it, or for whatever reason I do it, and you find that I'm HIV positive, and as a byproduct of that, you tell me to hand over my keys and not come back to your workplace.
Yeah. I want to read a case that came from Jane-Plus that was supported by JFJ JMR. And it says that in 2023, the complainant was diagnosed with HIV. He disclosed his status to his younger sister, who disclosed it to their mother. The mother disclosed it to other members of the family, and since then he has experienced stigma and discrimination by members of the family. His mother cursed him and told him that he has AIDS and that he's a B-man. The complainant was told by his sister-in-law not to visit so as not to mix with the children. She spat on him and threatened to throw water on him. JFJ, we sent a warning letter to the mother, but she continued to harass the complainant. And in that moment, this person, you're seeing two issues now being disclosed. His perceived sexual orientation as well as his health status by his mother.
Yeah.
I want to put that in context for the listeners. How many of these types of cases do you have in 2024? Not the exact number compared to 2023. Are we seeing a decline, JMR?
Unfortunately, no. So the 2023 data, as you would have known, indicates that 26% of stigma and discrimination, and a large majority of them being involuntary disclosure, happens in the community.
Yes.
The truth is the 2024 data is trending in the same direction. And I think, if anything, I highlighted it this morning in another conversation. If anything, it shows that we need to get back to community, real community engagement.
One-on-one conversation, small groups.
Absolutely. Grassroots media, we need to go back there. We cannot assume that because social media is widely known that everybody has the same access to information. And I think we took that assumption for the past couple of years, and we're seeing, as a consequence, where stigma and discrimination is still rampant in the communities. In 2024, you still have people who believe that if you have sex with a virgin, you can be cured of HIV.
Gemma, I want you to just stay with us for a few more minutes. We have to take the break, but I want to pick up with something that you said and give another case example of issues affecting people with HIV.
No problem.
Unique Unique Living's new arrivals are here. Revamp your space with sleek, fixed and sliding show panels, shower systems and faucets, stylish vanities, basins and kitchen sinks, closet and storage solutions, hanging aids, and more. Available in different finishes and sizes to match your style. Visit them today and transform your space at shop number 630 Dunrobin Avenue, Kingston 10. Call 876-755-3661 or visit their website at uniquelivingja.com to shop.
Catch the E-Zone with me, the Stinger Honeybee, alongside
Kareem Boy Ting.
as we turn up the heat in the street.
New show.
New vibe.
Same us.
Same us.
Monday to Friday, 3 to 5 p.m.
Right here on Nationwide 90 FM.
We'll bring you entertainment news.
We'll take away your Monday blues.
You don't want to miss a week with us.
We'll talk health.
Well,
jump into the mix.
Or the hot seat.
Don't miss the brain buster.
Or the crazy giveaways.
I mean, is this planet Earth?
Is it?
I don't know. Let me check. Either way, it's got a buzz.
And a bugger thing.
Ow.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're joined by Jamar Johnson, one of my favorite persons. I'm being very clear that he is on air, working with the JN Plus, and we're discussing stigma and discrimination. Jamar, I was with a group of women who are living with HIV sometime last week, and we were exploring together whether or not things have improved. And I can tell you, when we looked at the data, stigma index and other research that have been done over the years, we know that there were improvements when it comes to healthcare workers, both medical and non-medical, like your security guard and so on at the health facilities.
Right.
But the women are asserting that we are regressing. One of them shared her experience that when she had her last child, she was recommended to tie off, as Jamaicans would say, to prevent passing on the virus. Another woman shared with us that she had a cut following, vaginal birth, and she was almost treated with scorn. Right. Another one shared her experience where she went to a hospital. She had an injury to her leg, and she said to the nurse, "I'm HIV positive," because the nurse didn't even have on her gloves, which is universal precaution that ought to be exercised. And the nurse treated her with scant regard after that disclosure. And while one of the incidents happened in 2015 thereabout, the women are saying that some of these incidents are happening as late as last year. What is your experience at JN Plus?
Unfortunately, we would have gotten some cases very similar to that. And we find that though a lot of medical professionals, especially, well, not a lot, let me not say a lot, but some medical professionals, especially those who are not directly involved in HIV care,
yes,
are very knowledgeable as it relates to some of the new sciences and the new approaches that has to do with HIV treatment and care. So the theme, for example, that we use at the World AIDS Breakfast Forum is U equal U, the catalyst to change.
Yes.
And a lot of persons do not know that if a person consistently take their medication, go to their clinic appointments, that kind of a thing, they can get to a status known as undetectable, and that means that they cannot transmit the virus sexually. And because of that lack of information, we still feel that you still have a few people who believe that it is okay to disrespect women and not regard their sexual and reproductive health rights,
yes,
which is absolutely absurd. So what we find is that the science of U equal U, which is why we're pushing for it in this year and moving forward, needs to become broader public knowledge. Again, going back not just social media, traditional media, one-on-one engagement, because that's one of the things that's a barrier in terms of having fruitful conversation with women of reproductive age.
You know, there was an article covering Jamaica AIDS Support for Life. They had a great event over the weekend, apparently training media professionals. And Dr. Jennifer Tomlinson, the medical director of Jamaica AIDS Support for Life, was quoted in the Jamaica Observer as giving an experience of a young woman who did not disclose to her partner, who is a licensed firearm holder, because she's fearful that if she were to disclose, you know, she could be harmed. And I was amazed, J. Myron listeners, as to the comments under the article. One woman saying, I don't condone violence against women, but another one saying that because she did not disclose, she should be shot. You know, it's just amazing the level of cruelty, but fundamental misunderstandings that we have on these issues. And another one was saying that once you're living with HIV and you shouldn't pass the first date without telling this prospective partner that you're living with the virus. In Jade? Jamar, what do you think of those things? How do you explain the issue of disclosure and the conversation quickly that ties it to gender-based and domestic violence so the listeners can appreciate our perspective on this?
So I think to start this off, I don't think we recognize what we're asking for in a lot of instances, and that's why we make some of these requests of persons living with HIV. I will say this, that a person living with HIV ought to disclose when they are ready to disclose. And that takes into consideration as an assessment of why I want to disclose, who I want to disclose to, where am I going to do it, how am I going to do it, that kind of a thing.
And is it safe for me to disclose?
Exactly, because the safety of the person living with HIV is absolutely paramount in that kind of a situation. We only recommend disclosure to persons who is going to support you in terms of adherence to your treatment and adherence to your care. Right?
Yes.
But I don't think, for example, that if people think that a person living with HIV ought to disclose on the first date, then what good for the goose, good for the gander. Because if you were ever exposed to any other STDs apart from HIV, it means that you need to be disclosing that as well. Is that the kind of future that we want? If you've ever had any other STDs that's not HIV, you need to disclose that as well. Is that the kind of future that we want? What makes HIV so special that a person living with HIV has to disclose at the first date?
Especially as you articulated the you versus you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't think a lot of the times we consider what we're asking for. And again, it's fueled by a lot of misinformation and persons just not knowing the signs of HIV. And also, I would like to put this in the conversation that your sexual and reproductive health rights and responsibility is your responsibility. So it's not on the person living with HIV to take care of your SRHR rights.
Because, you know, Jamar, as you said that, when we're dating people, we don't date and say, darling, let us go together and get a test. Huh? We don't do these things. Where is your responsibility in ensuring that you wrap it up? So to speak, you utilize a condom. And I want to do a plug for both organizations, and I'm going to ask you, because we're coming up on time, but before I ask you to just tell the listeners how to get in touch with JN Plus based on the services that you offer, just to indicate that Jamaica AIDS Support for Life, they're up by Emancipation Park today. They're offering lots of prizes and giveaways, I think between 2 and 7 o'clock. But if you want to get yourself tested, bring your partner along to Jassel. 925-0021, and they're at 3 Hendon Drive, Kingston. Go there. Get yourself tested. You're your partner. I won't steal the Jamaica label song that says me and my neighbor. But we can sing it. Me and my partner going to Jassel to get ourselves tested for HIV. And the services that Jane Plus offers, Jamar, before we have to close out?
So we primarily cater to persons living with and affected by HIV. We do advocacy work. We do treatment support. So if you need help finding a treatment site in order to access your medication and to see a doctor, we help with that. If you need psychosocial assistance, that's to see a psychologist, we also help with that. Our office is located 2 Duke Street, downtown. You can find us at MyJN Plus on all social media platforms. And you can just DM us, and we will reach out to you to see how best we can meet your needs.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good day. So, Jade, as we get on the rights path, which is human rights, we're advocating here strongly at JFJ, get yourself tested. I'm looking at Marigold Weber saying, know your status. That's important.
It's very important.
Yes.
Very
Don't rely on the other partner. You know, men tend to find themselves in these little predicament wherein I know my status based on the status of the person I'm having sex with. No, my gentle folks, my men in Jamaica who are listening, get yourselves tested. Your status is your own. Your status cannot be determined by your partner. And for those persons, my brothers, my sisters who are living with HIV, disclose when it is safe for you to do so. You can call Jane Plus for support. They can help you with safe disclosure. JASA also does it. But before we close out.
Yes, in the 4 minutes that we have, this Sunday, December 8th, it's Run for Rights. Our registration is closing tomorrow. So if you would like to participate, it is only $2,000 for individuals, $1,500 for teams of 20. If you would like to participate, you can register at the link. It is, I want it to come up on my screen. Yes, it is my.raceresult.com/303879. So my.raceresult.com 303-879. And if you're on Nationwide YouTube channel, you will see the flyer up on your screen. So register, come and join us. We're warming up at 6:30. Jenny will be on site hosting. We'll be having a little performance by Kevin Downswell as well. Medals, prizes, get your shirt, get your bib, and come on out and join us and run for rights. Right?
And we acknowledge our sponsors, Nationwide News Network, Elcos, I can't pronounce that one, Mothers, Wisinko, Observer, Caribbean Dreams, Istrotech. Jade, for those that I did not call, you seeing it?
Yes, Starlight, Royal Trophies, Powerade. So we will be Caribbean Dreams. You said that?
Yes. By the way, I'm doing my leg pressing, you know.
I don't believe you.
I did. I went to gym and I was there leg pressing with 60 pounds of things, you know, pushing up.
So you're telling me that you're ready to run?
No, not which run. I walk in. Can I run? Let's not push it now.
I will be checking your bib number. I will publish Michael's bib number so that when the race results come out,
no.
you can all check her time and see where she fell in the list.
But on December 10th, that's Human Rights Day, you can also join JFJ at Emancipation Park between 12 noon and 5 p.m. And we have our partners that will be there with us celebrating International Human Rights Day.
Yes.
You will have, for example, like Jade, I'm looking for my flyer because I am visually impaired. But we will have the Ministry of Justice, for example, talking about their child diversion program. We're going to be having our other partners, Jassel, Jane Plus, who was just
Ministry
on with
of
us,
Labor and Social Security.
Indicom, and so on, you know. So it's going to be a good day where you can learn about accessing your rights to justice, knowing more about, legal protection orders, occupation orders. So if you're a victim of domestic violence, you can talk to an attorney on site. Jade will be there, who's an attorney at law, to respond to whatever queries you may have. So
there will also be some free HIV and syphilis testing on site as well.
Okay, good. So yes, we culminate the 16th day of activism on December 10th. So big things happening, and I just want to say congratulations to all who work in the human rights field and the HIV sector. They have been hard at work since about November 25. Before, we were always stressed out, but in particular the 16 days has been. Oh, and by the way, Women's Media Watch on November 5, they're going to be up by Papine having an event where you can wear your black and stand in solidarity. Oh, it's December. Why am I pushing it back to November when I really want to go and leave to celebrate my Christmas holidays? So December 5 up by Papine, around, I don't remember the exact time, but around 4 o'clock thereabout, you can join WMW at Papine Square, wear your black in solidarity with women who have survived violence. All right? So my name is Michael Jackson.
And I'm Jade Williams.
Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you next week.
Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or Jamaicans4Justice.org.
The people's champion.